Time for Focus next, and today we bring you a report from Niger, a country that has been at the heart of migration routes for a long time. The city of Agadez is one of the primary transit points to Libya for migrants hoping to make their way here to Europe. It's here the French President Emmanuel Macron wants to set up migrant processing centers so asylum seekers don't end up making the dangerous crossing to Europe. Eventually, 3,000 refugees from this center and one in Chad would end up in France. Now, Agadez is combating multifaceted challenges, including bringing back visitors to the once popular tourist destination. Bastien Renouille and Julia Steers filed this report.
As always, Ibrahim rises with the sun in Niger, a desert region located close to the Sahara. This morning, the tour guide is off to the village of Azel, an oasis once popular with European tourists. But today, Western embassies ban visits to the region, citing terror threats. In the last decade, visitors have all but disappeared. Ibrahim goes to meet the village chief, who he works with to organize visits. They don't understand why the area is on the no-go list.
There has never been anything here. No terrorists, no violence, even during the Tuareg rebellion in 2008. There is no risk for tourists. Azel has always been calm.
As they wait for the return of tourists, residents of the oasis rely on agriculture. Movement in the desert is limited. Foreigners have to travel with a police escort.
The tourists, they don't like this escort at all. They come here on vacation. So they don't want to be surrounded by weapons and men in uniform.
Agadez, the capital of the region, is renowned for its 16th century Great Mosque and its history as one of the sites of the caravans that crossed the desert. Here, too, tourists have vanished. Business is slow at local boutiques and most hotels are empty. The economy is floundering and there are no longer direct flights from France to Agadez. The city seems remarkably calm. But fears of terrorism and organized crime are ever present. Once a week at night, this convoy cuts through the desert. Guarded by soldiers, 20 vehicles arrive from the north. The road is dangerous and they need the escort. Some passengers are migrants fleeing Libya, others merchants en route to Agadez.
On ouvre tout ça là. Hey, ouvrez tout ça là. Faut faire descendre tout. On va voir.
Exhausted, their faces are worn from days of crossing. It takes hours for the travelers to sort out all the cargo. Tonight, no weapons were found in the convoy, but men are regularly arrested for illegal trafficking, mainly of human beings. Several smuggling cases have been heard at the city's high court. A 2015 law now strictly penalizes those trafficking migrants in Niger. Perpetrators risk years in prison. Given the sensitivity of the cases, everyone at the trial must be anonymous. The judge is concerned about reprisals. To demonstrate the magnitude of the migrant trade, the authorities want to show us the seizures. 107 vehicles once owned by smugglers are lined up. Worth tens of thousands of euros each, they've transported hundreds of migrants to Libya before being stopped by police. But only the traffickers are convicted.
In our eyes, migrants are the victims. So when we arrest them, we hand them over to the IOM, the International Organization for Migration. That's where they're brought back to their home country, or if they want, they can also stay here.
The International Organization for Migration has repatriated over 5,000 people in 2017. France hopes to team up with IOM to create these selection centers to assist migrants in reaching Europe safely. But today, most people don't have that option. On the outskirts of the city, migrants pack into houses owned by smugglers, saying they have no choice but to attempt a crossing. Boubacar is stuck in Agadez. For 4 months, he was jailed, sold, and tortured in Libya. His family paid for his release, and he fled to Niger. His family and friends have already spent too much to help him reach Europe. He says nothing can convince him to return to
Il y a
Libya.
une prison là-bas, là c'est dans le conteneur. Si tu es rentré dedans, ça, il n'y a pas vent dedans. Si tu es rentré là-bas, ça, et te demande 2 jours pour rester en vie. C'est soit l'argent, soit tu es mort. Ça commence à Agadez ici. C'est ici qu'ils ont commencé à vendre les migrants. Si le gouvernement veut enquêter, il n'a qu'à commencer à Agadez ici. Ils sont ici.
The Sahel crisis has pushed Agadez to the brink. The war in Libya and jihadist groups prevent the government from stabilizing the region enough for tourism to return. Still, the city hopes to rediscover the eminence of its past.
For more on this, we can bring in security expert and researcher Jérôme Pigné. Thank you very much for joining us on the program.
Thank you.
Now, the French President Emmanuel Macron wants to create migrant hotspots. Will this stop migrants from making the crossing to Europe?
Unfortunately, definitely not. I think we have to take our path back to the origins and the factors that bring people to create that mobility, that migration. And hotspot is just because it's a sensitive topic. We have to, as French and as European and as Westerners, we have to be very careful with the decision that we make on migration, because it's part of the more global security and development approach that the EU and others have to take in the region. And hotspot is definitely not the right solution, even on a short-term perspective. We have to work with government and to understand more globally why people do their migration within the region and beyond. And hotspot is not a right choice to make right now.
But okay, if not for hotspots, how do we prevent? As you said, you have to work on fixing the problem in
and to understand
Niger.
the causes, the real causes of migration, because they're not related
But
to.
these take a lot of time to address.
It takes a long time because we haven't, in the past decades, I'm not saying in the last months or even in the last years, in the last decades, we haven't understood, as, again, the international community, the reason why people do their migration and why do we have that kind of mobility within the region, because most of the migrations and the mobility of people is concerned through the region and not for the people who wants to go to Europe, for example. So if we don't have the good perception and representation in terms of the causes, security and development causes, because there are economic reasons also why it's not just about security matters. And if we, as the international community, do not understand those diagnoses, we will come out with a political solution that will not be accurate.
Now, in recent weeks, the discussion has shifted from migrant flows to stopping, to fighting human slavery, because we all saw those images out of Libya. Wouldn't hotspots end that menace?
It might end that menace on a short-term perspective, but as the reasons of migrations are related to structural, not just contextual patterns, we have to, as I said, take a bigger picture, a bigger integrated approach on that issue, and not just to see hotspot as the solution in a long-term perspective.
Now, leaders of G5 nations are meeting today in Paris to address pitfalls of this security system. Mm-hmm. They've spoken about funding. They've received funds from the UAE and Saudi Arabia. Aside from the terror threat in the Sahel region, should the G5 army or task force combat the migrant flows and human traffickers as well?
You're definitely right. And the G5 was not created just for security purposes. It was created to make sure that we have coherent national and regional and even international approaches to security, but security is related to development. And the G5 forces is a necessity, again, on the short and medium-term perspectives. But development issues are structural, and G5 also have to encompass all that development and economic dynamics in the region.
Jérôme Pigné, we're going to have to leave it there. Thank you very much for joining us on the program.